Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9:30 and the inquiry is resumed. This is an inquiry into an appeal made by Dido Property Limited against the decision of Buckinghamshire Council to refuse planning permission for production space and supporting buildings for screen-based media and associated services and industries at land adjacent to the A4155 Marlow Road and Westhorpe Farm Lane, Marlow. If there is anyone new today, my name is Katie MacDonald. I am a Chartered Town Planner and Planning Inspector, and I'm appointed by the Secretary of State to hold this inquiry. This is day number 7. No, it's not. It's day number 8. Usual reminders, please. Mobile phones, other electronic devices, switch to silent. We should be finishing around 1 p.m. today. It may run a bit later, depending on how long the session takes. We'll have a suitable break mid-morning. No fire drills planned. Fire escape at the back of the room. Exit via the stairs you came in through, up, down, and assemble at the riverside. Toilets are just there, and accessible toilets are here. Up to yet, I've heard opening statements from the main parties. I've heard comments from interested parties. I've heard from the appellant's master planner and scheme designer. I've heard evidence from all landscape witnesses. I've heard all the Rule 6 evidence. I've had a roundtable session on ecology and on noise, and I've heard the council's evidence on need as well. So today we'll start to hear the appellant's evidence on need, starting with Amanda Nevill. Are you Mrs? Thank you. Any procedural or housekeeping matters?
Just one, Madam, from me. As you're aware, Madam, the Growth and Infrastructure Housing Select Committee met yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
And the recommendation to approve the Cabinet resolution of the 2nd of January 2025 and take no further action on the referral was approved by Cabinet by 9 votes to 2. We'll provide a note of that to you in due course, but that's just to update you.
Thank you. That's helpful to know. Anything else? Nope.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yes, Mr. White.
Oh, thank you. Can I just check the menu for today is obviously Mrs. Nevill, and then we move on to conditions 106. You'd like to do, just to confirm, you'd like both conditions and 106 discussed. Yeah, no, great. I just wanted clarity. We all thought that was the position, but I just obviously wanted your confirmation.
Yeah, ideally we'll just the 106. I've not had a chance to look at the updated version, so I really just want you to talk me through that.
Great.
Both 106s. The conditions, obviously, I've not seen any updates on those from my comments. So,
I think there are. Go on, Mr. Sensible.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
We have had further dialogue with the council.
Is your mic on? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering for the live streamers.
We have had further dialogue with the council. There's been exchange of emails. Susan Kitchen from the council is producing a new version for you with the spreadsheet.
Yep.
I think we're expecting to see something today, but we won't have checked it. So I think it'll, in a way, this is the update.
Okay.
Things are progressing.
Yep.
And we'll have material to share with you, I suspect, today. Whether we can then talk to it as well is a moot point.
Okay, we'll see where we get to then.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask, in terms of the 106, Mr. Andrews is to my left next to Mr. Fraser, and I know the council solicitor is also here. Is there anybody else you would feel you would like to benefit today from having, like any of the highway bods or anybody else? I mean, I'm not suggesting there's a need, but will you just have a mull? Because if there is anyone you would like, obviously we need to get them here.
I think it's probably a bit late in the day to be pulling people in now. If we just talk through it and run me through what the 106 does and doesn't do, and then if we need another session later on with other people in then we can do that, or it can get picked up potentially in highways evidence anyway at that point, or planning.
Great.
All right. Mr. White, would you like to introduce your witness, please?
I absolutely would. Thank you very much. And I think, ma'am, the inquiry needs the inquiry needs for your evidence. Is that working? Yeah. Yeah, great. I think we always, the problem is there's no speaker this end of the room, so That's the nearest speaker, why it's always so difficult to know whether it's on. Anyway. Yes, exactly. Mr. Barracliff. So let me introduce Miss Nevill, and I think for the purposes of this evidence, Mrs. Nevill, you need just her proof of evidence, and I think that's probably satisfactory. I know my time estimate's 45 minutes, and I'll absolutely keep to that for examination chief. Can I start off by introducing you, please, to the inquiry, Mrs. Nevill? And you are Amanda Nevill. Yeah. Are you on? Is that on?
Yes,
there
it
we
is
go.
now.
Brilliant.
Yes,
And you were the former chief executive of the British Film Institute.
I was.
You were, which is the government's lead body for film in the UK. We'll come back to that. You also have an honorary fellowship from the Royal Photographic Society and honorary fellowship of the British Film Institute. You have an honorary doctorate of letters from the University of Bradford, and you were also awarded an honorary degree by the University of York. You're appointed a commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to the film industry in 2015. In 2016, you received the Barclays Businesswoman in Film and Television Award, which, in the light of Barclays just becoming the lead sponsor at Lord's, don't forget you can go to Lord's now as a result of that. You joined the BFI as the organisation's director in June 2003, and your job title changed to chief exec in 2011, which followed the BFI's takeover of the UK Film Council, and you led the BFI's transformation into the government's lead body for film in the UK and UK Film International. We'll come back to that in a moment. And therefore, in that position, you were responsible to government and acting as a voice of industry. And no doubt you dealt with Lord Vasey, who gave evidence on the Wednesday night when he, as he said, was Minister for Film. You also led the delivery of the first holistic 5-year industrial strategy for UK film and moving image, which was called Film Forever, which was launched by ministers in 2012 and was followed by a further paper in 2018, which was entitled BFI 2022. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You led the founding of the BFI Film Academy to seek out and enable young people from challenging backgrounds to film to address the skills gap, and 3,000 people from very diverse backgrounds were prepared for the industry. And there were further trainee programs we've heard, and the inspector's going to see on Monday the Lucasfilm's presence at Pinewood. Disney, of course, which we also know that's also highly relevant, and Eon, who were producers of the James Bond films and also obviously closely related to Pinewood. You also led the strategic development of cultural and creative screen hubs across England, and you were responsible for the BFI's Film Lottery Investment Fund. Is that, as it says on the tin, effectively it received some of the lottery funds to invest in films?
That's right, yes.
And there you also, that fund was responsible for various films which have garnered awards at various places, including, and the inspector might have, American Honey, God's Own Country, Rocks, directed Sarah Gavron. And as a completely irrelevant aside, I lived with her sister in Cambridge. It's an interesting coincidence. And The Favourite. And I ensured the strategic development, you ensured the strategic development of the UK in the rest of Europe, the US and China. Also involved in setting up a BFI player, and that was the first cultural, BFI was the first cultural organisation to grow audiences through its own commercial digital platform. And also at your time, one of the things that you took great interest and sought to add to was a change in diversity, equity and inclusion across the industry. Is that correct?
Yes, very passionate about that.
Since 2020, is 2020 effectively the time, is that the date you left the BFI or not?
Yes, March 2020.
March 2020, literally probably at the time of COVID commenced.
A week before lockdown. Very strange experience.
Yes, so freedom in March 2020, then lockdown. And you are now deputy chair of the London Film School, which I imagine is involved, is it not, in the training of young people wanting to qualify in various film disciplines? Is that right?
It is postgrad, very international.
Yes. Sorry, this is Tony. That's where my best man went, actually. So I'm turning this very personal. just next point, also you were retained by, the inspector will have seen that I think Mr. Kershaw had some documentation from Olsberg SBI, which are a consultancy involved in global screen strategy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You're also strategic advisor to Pathway, and you also work frequently advising overseas governments on the development of the screen industries. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Then in relation to Marlow, you were appointed as an advisor since April 2022, and your function in that role has been as the non-executive member of the initial advisory group, and obviously you're now instructed to provide evidence for the appellants. Now, can I ask you various matters that lead from that background and experience? First of all, to the inspector, could you just describe what the British Film Institute actually is, please?
It's technically a non-departmental government body, so it has a great degree of independence, but is funded by government and therefore has to fall under that. What it actually does, it's there to ensure that British film prospers, and by British film I don't just mean films that are made in Britain, but that filmmaking in Britain prospers. And that entails both audiences and filmmakers. It's about finding the next generation of talent. It's about nurturing existing talent. It's about making sure that the UK is the easiest and most exciting place to attract inward investment. And it's also about making sure, because film is very much a global business, that the filmic and high-end TV relations with other countries are good. So, for example, when I was at the BFI, we signed a co-production treaty with China, co-production treaty with Italy. In other words, a recognition that the prosperity of film depends on that global engagement.
Thank you. And just the inspector might have heard, just to give it a sense of other organisations, there's also reference to BAFTA, which is the equivalent, I'm sure the inspector's heard of the Academy in America, which gives the Oscars. BAFTA also give the BAFTA awards. How do you distinguish BAFTA from the BFI, please?
So both organisations are really, really important for the promotion of British film and filmmaking in Britain. BAFTA is an industry organisation. It's owned and is there really to serve its members, and in so doing to serve film. The BFI is a public body. I always said to my colleagues at the BFI, we are there to serve the people of Britain. Also in size, I mean, the BFI is very big. It directly works with government to influence, whereas I think BAFTA is more of an independent organisation, although both are charities.
Now, you said both charities. Does the BFI receive funding from the government?
It does.
Yeah,
it does. But that's a minority funding. I think the majority of the funding is still self-generated through its businesses.
Thank you. And you said it was a non-departmental government body, is in your position as chief executive, were you answerable to effectively a member of government?
I had a board that was appointed by government, but I was also, I've forgotten what the title is, but if you are the CEO of a non-departmental public body, you are directly responsible for that. It's called an accounting officer, so you are directly responsible to a minister. So in theory, you can override your board. Luckily, I never had to do that.
Okay, thank you. It sounds incredibly similar to the planning inspectorate, which the inspector will have familiarity with as a non-departmental government body. Now, let's just deal with a couple of other points as well then. I want to ask you about the lottery fund, the investment fund. Since it was launched, did it coincide its launch with the commencement of the National Lottery, or was it later than that? Do you recall?
I think it was just fractionally later than that. It's a long time before my time, but it currently receives 2.7% of the good causes income, which goes to the BFI to be invested to help support really the next generation of filmmakers to sustain that grassroots level.
Thank you. Right, can we then I want your overview, please, of where we are, and I'm going to do this in 3 stages. Can we talk about the past, the present and the future? Now, you commenced as the organisation's director in June 2003. You left in March 2020. can you just talk through the inspector, the journey that you undertook in relation to British film? We've obviously got very significant evidence from Mr. Kershaw and our witnesses from various sources showing the kind of financial approach, what happened, etc. But I just want your kind of intuitive memory of what you oversaw from 2003 to 2020. What happened with British film, please?
So I think first on the agencies behind it. When I joined the BFI, it was very much the lead cultural body for film, and there existed at that time a separate entity called the UK Film Council, which had been set up deliberately to superpower the notion that Britain ought to be getting much more involved in film commercially. So I think there was an absolute understanding of the commercial potential that film could have at that time. In 2007, the first tax incentives were introduced, and as all the evidence has shown, that led to an absolutely meteoric rise in the amount of production that started to come to the UK. And as I laid out in my evidence, a tax incentive is really important because not only does it attract inward investment, but it also delivers a level of business which ensures that there is a net benefit back into Treasury itself. So this isn't a giveaway. There's a very strong economic reason. And one of the biggest things we had to do at the BFI all the time was to justify and to be able to work with Treasury on an annual basis to show that that investment was worthwhile. But a tax incentive on its own is insufficient. Any producer will tell you that as tax incentives have grown in competition around the world, I mean, there are hundreds nowadays, you need many other aspects in the industry in order to ensure that productions will come this way. So you need stability, because producers need that level of stability because it reduces financial risk. You need fantastic infrastructure. You need crews who absolutely know what they are doing. And it also helps, and it's one of the things that I think is sometimes really underplayed in the UK, is if you have a creative environment and an environment that is easy for creative people to come to. So, you know, theatres, hotels, restaurants, that whole sort of soft halo round it. So if you like, the UK has got that whole package. However, I think the journey to come back to the question from 2003 to where we are now is about having built and sustained that package. So constantly, I think the role of the BFI, my role, was to constantly, to survey what was going on in the world, to work out where the competition was coming from. At the same time, was to listen to what the industry, both the home industry and the international industry, was saying in terms of what they needed within the UK for the UK to retain that competitive edge. Does that?
Yes, thank you very much. Now let's now do an audit, please, in your view of where we are in 2025, because obviously the inspector's got a lot of evidence that she'll hear from next week and from Mr. Kershaw yesterday about where we are. And I just wanted your sense, if you were to describe the state of the British film industry in 2025, what would you say, please?
I think it's difficult to underestimate how strong and phenomenal, and I also believe that the industry is on the cusp of being able to be even stronger. So it's definitely one of the second, always in the top two important filmmaking hubs in the world. And I mean, there are places that make more films in number, like Bollywood, for example, does, but they're much, much lower budgets, and they are much more domestically based. Whereas what the UK has managed to do, it's managed to create this crucible of activity which both attracts business in and creates product which goes out and which therefore attracts more in, if you like. Could you sort of push me a bit in some of the areas you?
Yes, I mean, let's talk about the UK and the global marketplace. Obviously, as you say, you advise other governments, and you also got a sense of just how is the UK, when you, let's imagine you I know you're going to need a leap of imagination, but let's take you from rainy Wickham, say, to you're in the Polo Lounge of the Beverly Hills Hotel on a film industry meeting, and people are asking you about the British film industry in 25. What would you say to an informed observer from America about how Britain is doing currently?
Britain is absolutely thriving on every front, and I think the figures themselves show. I mean, for example, we've had a couple of rocky years through COVID and the strikes, and yet Britain bounced back very, very quickly after that. We have fantastic infrastructure. We have fantastic crews. We have amazing, actually, political stability over the next 5 years, and a government which is clearly very, very committed to retaining all the fiscal incentives. I think the other thing that's really important, and that producers, for example, in the US always want to hear, is they want to know if they are going to plan, for example, for the next 2 to 3 years to bring productions into the UK. What is that landing ground likely to be? And we currently have a government which has made it very clear that they see the creative industries and film and TV as one of the great growth areas of the future. So in that context, for me, and it's one of the reasons I got involved in Marlowe, I think that if you are sitting there thinking, what do we need to do in the UK to ensure that not only we can retain and continue the level of growth of business coming into the UK, but what actually would it take to grab more of that market share, which is demonstrably out there. There's a lot of business out there. I think we've got something like a 10% part of market share at the moment. What would you need to do? And actually, if you've got the fiscal incentives, it's a tick. You've got the crews and you've got the training and you've got the willingness from the top and the organisations and agencies underneath to deliver that training, then infrastructure is really, really important, which is why I think Marlowe, it's important in so many ways. Obviously, it's important from a technical sense in what it's able to deliver, but it also sends out an incredibly important message about the confidence of the UK, our commitment to modernisation and creating world-beating, world-beating destinations for filmmakers to come to. It's a flag of huge confidence and assertion that this is an industry we intend to stay in. But I have said in my evidence, and I don't know whether I'm talking too much here, but we cannot be complacent. We really can't, because filmmakers work in quite a long arc, and studios, in particular where the big business comes, works in a much longer arc than 18 months. We need to be thinking about, what do we want the industry in the UK to look like in 10 years' time? What do we need to do to get a greater market share of that? And I work quite a lot around the world. I work a lot, for example, in Saudi Arabia. They are introducing fantastic fiscal incentives. They are building infrastructure and studios which are to only dream of. I mean, just like Marlowe is proposing to do here. But they're also putting in place all the soft stuff around it to make it attractive. And whereas that might be a territory that we might be inclined to write off at the moment, I would really advise that we shouldn't write it off in the context of 10 years when they've matured and they've really matured their crew base and they've matured their delivery of the fiscal incentives, and there've been enough productions to go there that are able to tell them that it's a good place. So the competition out there is strong, and as a country we need to be seen to invest, and this is private investment. It's not even about public investment, it's private investment into the right place, I think at the right time, to ensure we can grab a bigger market share of what we know and all the evidence is showing is out there.
Thank you. Now, can I then just ask you about an audit of existing space? We've had a lot of discussion and a lot of evidence on what actually exists. And I just first of all wanted you, applying your qualitative eyesight, what would you say about the existing space that exists for filmmaking and high-end television production in the UK currently, please?
I think I'm very glad to see that there are pipelines of good space that's come in, like Shinfield, because we really need it. I mean, Pinewood and Shepperton will always have a great place in people's heart and filmmakers, because so much has been made there. But what we have seen over the last recent times is, as there's been such a need for space, there has been this rush to convert a lot of spaces. And whereas really clever producers and clever studios have managed to turn some of these places into adequate and viable spaces, I think in their hearts, if you were going to go to them and say, look, would you be happy to convert a warehouse, or would actually you prefer to be able to walk straight into a ready-made modern environment where your crews and your talent are going to be able to just move straight into production without worrying about sound or noise or water or electricity supply or whatever? I think that will be the case. So I think there's enough evidence to show that it's quite a mixed bag. But the question here is, do we need another new modern studio? And
Sorry.
yeah,
You're not on now. The curse of the battery microphone.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm trying to take note. I'm trying to take note in response to the question, and if you stop going up.
I do. Pull me up. No, it's fine. Pull me up. I forgot what the question was. Now.
The-
Oh, studios.
What do you say about the existing space that
Yeah.
exists? If there's like an audit of existing space in.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking
Yes.
about, let me, we've had a lot of evidence. We've obviously got, let's lead it, let's deal with it, let's break it down and deal with
Yeah.
the top. There's evidence from the appellants, grade A, which I know you've got a sense from having read Knight Frank. We've got the Sheppertons, the Pinewoods, the Warner Brothers, the Elstrees, the Shinfields, the Belfasts, the Dagenhams. What do you say at the top end of the market? What would be your judgment on an audit of the kind of the grade A space and its relationship? Obviously, we'll come on to ask you about master leases, but let me just ask you about your audit of what's available now, please.
What's freely available of top quality space along the lines of Marlow that isn't with
Sorry.
no, that's all right. I'm waiting for you now because you're typing. And what's not tied up? I think the evidence shows that it's quite limited.
And then let me also ask you about your understanding of the market, because we've got schedules from Knight Frank and Mr. Kershaw which show very significant amount of floor space. How relevant is what the configuration and nature of that floor space in the marketplace? I mean, for example, from your experience, do the Hollywood producers, would they be happy going to certain space, or do they have minimum requirements or not? What's your sense of how the market breaks down into different areas?
I think they would always choose to go to the best space that they could possibly find, because that reduces risk on all fronts.
Now, let me then, please, can I ask you about Marlow? It was an issue I asked both Mr. Kershaw and Mr. Fannin yesterday. Qualitative, you've been on the advisory board of Marlow since April 22. What do you say about what in your judgment is the quality of offer of Marlow, if any?
I think it's in this country, I think it's an absolute game changer, to be honest. There's a lot of discussion now in filmmaking about the environment in which you work. When you make a production, you're there for quite a long time. And I think to be within an environment that is not just top of its game technically, but is also nice to be in. I can't think of a more intelligent way of saying, but it's nice to be in. You like simple, it's good. If you put it this way, when you're trying to make a big film, so obviously you've got to put your money together, you've got to find out where you're going to do it. And a big component of that will be things like, how am I going to attract the right crew and the right casting? And it's well documented that to attract some of the top cast into London is much easier, for example, than trying to attract them to have them to spend 3 months in a more far-flung place. I think if you were to say to a producer that they've got to go and ask, top talent to go and work in a barren place or a converted warehouse, or whether they'd like to go and work in somewhere that has the style and design and environment that is proposed for Marlow, I think that would always win hands down. So I think it's a real game changer.
Thank you so much. Okay, then can I ask you, there are a couple of other matters I want to ask you about, particularly in relation to Mr. Kershaw's evidence we heard yesterday. In your experience, does the British film industry and overseas filmmakers, is there a recognition of something identified that we call the West London cluster? Is that a thing in your experience or not?
I think very much so. I think the iconic nature of Pinewood and Shepperton, because they've been there for so long. The National Film and Television School is incredibly internationally recognised. And when you're going to make a film, what you want is simplicity and you want the least risk. So the London Western WLC offers all that you need already, which is why it's a good site for Marlow Studios. You've got your transport links, you're close to London, you already know that most of your crew are in that environment, you know that your backup services are there. It's a proven destination with minimal risk.
And if an investor from overseas was saying they wanted to invest in a film studios in the UK from scratch, would your advice be to look primarily at the West London cluster or not?
Definitely.
Now, the next point I wanted to ask you about was this idea about grade A, quality, etc. When producers, and we'll hear from Miss Waite about this next week, but can I ask you, from your understanding, will producers make a judgment about the nature of the facilities they're being offered when choosing a studios? Is there a distinction, for example, between a 2-studio unit somewhere and, for example, a Shepperton, a Pinewood?
I think the evidence next week you're going to get backs up what I absolutely know, is that when you're choosing where to make your film, you'll be considering many factors. But in terms of de-risking it and making it as simple as possible, if you are able to get everything you need within one and the tightest, smallest environment for efficiency, that's what producers will always go for. So they will go for proven destination where they know they can get what they want.
Now, 2 final points I wanted to ask you about: staff and the position of recruitment. We've had various evidence on what the position with crew is, and Mr. Kershaw in his evidence gave various news items which showed underemployment in the sector. I just want you to update from your sense of where the market sits in January 25. How do you see the employment position of those that are specialists in film production? Where does it sit in your view in January 25?
So if you look at the trajectory of filmmaking in the UK, the need for crew, I mean, it demonstrates very easily the stresses and strains that have been put upon the UK in delivering the crew that are needed. There has been coverage recently that there was something like 68% of crew were out of work. But I think one has to tie that in with the strikes, because we were delivering something like just over £6 billion worth of production. And even though it was sometimes difficult to get crew, the price of that crew never got up to the prices that, for example, you were having to pay in Los Angeles, which suggests to me there was always just enough crew. I can completely understand that during the strike year and just after, freelance crew would be out of work. I think now, given that it's likely that the production spend is going to be over 6 billion, that the likelihood is that all of those crew are back at work. So going forward, how confident am I that the UK is going to be able to crew up to meet future demand? And I'm very confident. And the reason for this is when I was at the BFI, as the production was growing very, very steeply, and there was huge pressure on our ability to train up homegrown crew for those productions. And yet we managed it, even though we had, in a way, very immature mechanics for the delivering of that training. Whereas now we're 8 to 10 years on, and I think in my evidence I've shown that there are now so many agencies involved in this. We've got a government which is really committed to it. I mean, one very, very significant thing which I fought for and didn't get when I was at the BFI, but they've managed to achieve now, is the apprenticeship scheme, which just didn't work within the context of a freelance industry, because for an apprenticeship scheme you have to have a year's placement, and obviously most films don't film for a year. So it was quite frustrating, and I know there is a real commitment to change that now, which is really going to help. So I think my confidence in the ability of the education system and the government policies and the agencies to behind that, and the recognition of that, mean that there will be sufficient crew to ensure that the cost of that crew isn't inflated going forward.
Thank you. Now, finally, Mr. Nevill, can I ask you about not the planning system, but about after your years in the British film industry, looking to the future, I want to ask you about aspiration and aims, and what you say about whether we should look to be good enough or excellence or any other target. What do you say should be the approach of government, the planning system, the film industry? What should we be looking to do in your judgment into the future, please?
Thank you. So we're in an era when we have a government that is very clear that the creative industries are one of our big growth areas, and with reason. They haven't pulled it out of a hat. All of the data points to that. And again, as I said earlier, we're not alone. Other countries around the world are doing it. For me, looking at UK PLC and how we achieve that growth, we can't approach it as a just enough strategy. We have to say the what if. So I think from what I've been gathering and from the evidence, we're fairly comfortable that there is going to be growth, but that's growth based upon our current trajectory. And in my mind, I'm thinking, why would we only just aim for that? We know from the figures there's something like 50 to 70 billion pounds worth of new production globally per year being made, of which we get roughly, my maths aren't very good, 9 or 10%. If we just got another 2% of that, it would make a really, really big difference. So then you start to think, well, then what do we need as UK PLC to do that? So we have the fiscal incentives and we've got the stability. I know we've got the agencies and the policies behind crewing up. We know that we're already one of the favoured places on the planet to make film anyway. We know that. So really, infrastructure is going to be absolutely critical. We have to have not just enough, we have to have enough and of a quality to demonstrate that we are ready to take that growth in film that is there for us to get, really. So I think my advice is we can't pursue a policy of just enough. We have to pursue a policy of what do we need to do to ensure we can achieve more than just an uplift in our current trajectory of growth.
Actually, there's one other matter I just wanted to ask you about, and it's about the introduction in 2025, the independent film credit. And I just wanted your view on that. Obviously, the government's got fiscal concessions that you've identified for filmmaking, also, as I understand it, for AI, and now a third string on the arrow. Is that a phrase? No, it's not, is it? The bow. The bow is the independent film credit. And I just want to ask your view on what effect will that have, if any, in the ensuing years, please?
Part of what makes the UK such an attractive place is that we've got good crew, but actually a lot of the studios come here for our directors and our writers, and they need to be nurtured in some ways. And independent filmmaking in this country is the cauldron of invention. So ensuring that independent films can continue to be made so that people have that first step in the journey is really, really important. I think it also sends out, again, a very important message globally that not only are we going to make certain that we are technically wanting to remain the centre of film and television making, but that actually we also want to invest in a way to nurture our future talent. But it isn't just about homemaking productions. Quite a few of the studios have also said that they like the look of this tax credit and are actively talking about coming in and making smaller budget films themselves, which would be fantastic because it would mean that they too are going to be investing in that more grassroots level. The independent tax relief, I think, has a budget cap of productions of 15 million and below.
Mr. Nevill, thank you very much. Thank you, Mum. That's my examination in chief. Please wait there for questions.
I must be doing something wrong with this microphone. Mr. Bird, would you like to start your
Yes,
cross-examination?
please. Thank you much. Morning, Mrs. Nevill.
Good morning.
We're agreed, aren't we, that the BFI is the lead organisation for film and indeed high-end TV in the UK,
I think so, yes.
and it uses inter alia lottery funding to support film production, distribution, education and audience development, doesn't it?
It does.
Yes. And one of its responsibilities is to advise the government as to any deficiencies it's identified, amongst other things, in infrastructure, isn't it?
I think it probably delegates most of that to the British Film Commission, but
Its principal function, it has the function, it may delegate it to the British Film Commission. But I've read all of your proof, I've looked at all of your footnote references. I don't see, do I, and the inspector won't see anywhere, any statement or any research from the BFI which identifies either any existing quantitative or qualitative deficiency in studio stage space, or indeed any forecast deficiency, do I?
well, first of all, obviously I'm not at the BFI anymore, and secondly, all of that infrastructure work is delegated to the British Film Commission and is funded through lottery funds and government. So we have a British Film Commissioner, Adrian Witten, who I think you'll see in my evidence, and there is a letter that they are very supportive of the need for Marlow
We'll come to that.
studios.
I think the answer to my question is no, there's nothing from the BFI, is there?
Because the BFI doesn't
No.
do that, it
And-
delegates it to the British Film Commission.
Nor is there anything in your evidence of that kind from the BFC either, is there? The letter in support of Marlow does not, does it, identify an existing quantitative or qualitative deficiency in existing studio space, nor does it forecast any such deficiency, does it?
It doesn't forecast deficiency, but the statement does say that it supports any viable proposal coming forward. And that, I think that was very purposely put, that word.
Yeah, but not because of me, because of the role of the BFC, which is to encourage filmmaking in
Well,
the UK.
I think the BFC has to deal with many proposals because that will always be the first stop. I think the word viable is really important in that statement because it wouldn't, they it's only viable if there is need for it.
Yeah, well,
So their judgment presumably must be that there is a need to make it viable.
well, forgive me. Let's just put that in context. Can you take up core document 13.10? I don't know whether you're geared up to the core documents yet, but
Fingers crossed.
good.
Core document 1310.
13.
So that's on
10.
rule 6.
It's the oral evidence given to the House of Commons Committee on British Film and High-End Television.
Sorry, 13. Where is that within?
It's in.
There'll be a folder.
It's in a folder. If you probably find the interested parties evidence will be the folder 13.
13, yes.
And if you go within that, you'll see there's.
Is it Save Marlow
Save Marlow
Greenbelt? Yeah.
Greenbelt's one of their documents.
Okay, thank you. And it's 6, did you say?
No, 10.
10, sorry, I'll get that. I've got it.
Yeah,
It's a miracle.
because there's two separate folders that don't identify with the code.
No, I'm not very good at IT, so you have to bear with me.
Hey, I had a hissy fit about them on the first day.
I found it.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
thank
when
you.
you've got that, if you go to question 243, which is on page 28 of it's a PDF page. So
Oh, mine hasn't got numbers on it. Question 28.
no, 243.
243. Sorry, I'll get there in the end.
It's PDF page 28.
Thank you. 243. Yes, I've got it.
See there?
Thank you,
Question
yes.
two, It's a
Yes.
question from Clive Effort. Would you say that we have the studio capacity to make the most of that demand? And you can look at the previous question if you wish to, and the answer there. And we see Adrian Wooden, who is chair of the British Film Commission, isn't he?
He's the film commission. He's not the chair.
Or
he's
the
the
Film
CEO. Yeah.
Commissioner, yes, Film Commissioner.
Yeah.
And you can see what he says, that for the last 3 years, they've been involved in a major exercise, effectively increasing stage space, and have successfully done so by nearly 40%. He sets out in the next paragraph the extent of the increase, and he then says in the third paragraph, and this is only just last year, so the one thing I'm not worried about in that sense is studio capacity. We have
Yes.
the studio capacity to meet demand. What the UK and international industry are now working very hard on is to match the skills with that studio capacity. That is the key question. He's not, has he, identified any quantitative or qualitative need for additional studio stage space to meet demand?
Well, if I can just contextualize
Now,
this.
answer the question,
a
and
little
contextualise
bit.
as much as you like.
Okay, so I think he is assuming in this, because he talks above about the additional stages being built, he's assuming that the pipeline will be sufficient, and that's why he's not worried about that sense in studio capacity.
Well, go to question 261, which is further down in the document. It's on, I think, PDF page 36.
Got it, thank you.
Question from Jane Stevenson. Is the Stage Space Support and Development Initiative, I think it runs out at the end of next year, still having a good effect? Is it still relevant? Does it tie into all this space? Now, the Stage Space Support and Development Initiative was effectively the Commission funding or providing funding towards additional stage space, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes. And then you can see that Adrian Wooden, the stage-based development funding we received was for two purposes. First, it was to help to stimulate studio development where we needed the space, as we've talked about across all the nations and regions, and not just in London and the South East. And it's been very effective doing that. Second, it was to provide the British Film Commission with resilience so that we could still carry on supporting all activities.
Yes.
We're now beginning a process of trying to renew our funding, and Andrew and I have talked about this. That's Andrew Smith of Pinewood. Although we're not now in a process of trying to stimulate any new studio development, in particular above that, beyond what's already been announced, because we want to see how that stage space that has been built or is being built around all of the nations and the regions matches the demand as it comes through. There's still an enormous amount of work to do.
Yes.
See that? So they're not, British Film Commission is not, is it, actively putting funding towards additional stage space provision, because it wants to see how the additional stage space, which he's referred to in the earlier answer, beds in respect of demand.
Yes, it does say that in the next paragraph, because many of these studios are under construction or in planning.
Yeah, yeah.
And this one was one of those. I think Marlow was one of those in planning.
So that's what you rely upon in relation to that, is it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And as far as the letter that you referred to in your proof of evidence from the Commissioner, that does not, does it, identify a quantitative or qualitative need?
Can I just
You can turn it up.
Can I just refresh my brain of the quote on that?
You have it on page, you don't have page numbers, it's paragraph 3827.
In my evidence.
Yes,
Okay,
you've quoted his letter.
I did. 3827. Sorry, can you remind me of
Yes,
your
there
question
is
again?
no-
Sorry.
There is no reference to a quantitative or qualitative assessment of need underpinning this paragraph, is there? No evidence at all that the BFC has undertaken a quantitative and qualitative assessment to identify the need for 472,000 square feet of additional stage space at Marlow.
They have not carried out work specifically to look at the need for Marlow. I'm sure of that. They have, however, said that their judgment is guided by steered by the film and TV content pipeline and crew availability.
We'll come back to the crew availability in a moment. Yeah. And as to crew availability, that matters, doesn't it? Because in terms of production budget, it is the cost of crew, which is one of the most significant influences on the production budget, isn't it? It's more expensive than the studio space.
Can be, yes.
Good. And we've also already referred to the Commissioner's view that skills shortage is likely to be the most significant issue going forward. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with it. What I don't believe is that we are, as a country, not able to address that difficulty.
But it is it not, a key uncertainty at the moment?
I'm only pausing because I'm trying to decide if it is a key uncertainty at the moment, and I haven't got any evidence which would suggest to me, beyond anecdotal evidence like this, that it is a key.
Well, put it in some forecasts. As I understand it, the Screen Skills report of 2022 identified that in terms of future growth and the forecast growth in 2022, it was likely to need between 15 and 20,000 additional skilled crew to support. You recognise those figures?
No, I absolutely do,
Yeah.
and it rings a call bell, because I did when I was at the BFI, I did a previous study on skills about 5 years previously, and there was a need for 15 to 20,000 then as the trajectory went up, and we met that. And the systems were a lot less mature than they are now for training up skills. The other thing is, if you look at the size of the sector, and if you look at the turnover, you are always going to have, I would imagine, a very large percentage of need to bring in people at the bottom. The challenge is, have you got the training schemes, the education systems, and the funding in order to do that? And I'm confident that we have from.
Yes, but there's no analysis supporting that, is there? There's no analysis before this inquiry which demonstrates that in terms of the initiatives which are in place, they will deliver the scale of increase in skilled crew which is necessary to support the growth projections, as a matter of fact.
Not in my evidence, no.
No. Then we go back to your privilege section 2, where you deal with the overview of the UK film industry, where you give us a lot of information, for example, about the number of subscribers and the growth in subscription VOD and other subscription services, and indeed profit levels. But in terms of soundstage space, the key issue and what is relevant to the amount of stage space is the production spend, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And indeed, that proportion of production spend which will be spent on premium studio space, the grade A space, which is being proposed.
Yes.
Yeah. And here it is for high-end television and tentpole productions, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
And whilst the industry is global, US investment and inward investment remains the principal driver in terms of the use of studio space, doesn't it?
It does at the moment, yes.
Yeah. And if you go back to core document 13.10, that's the select committee.
Yes, got it.
Page 32, so PDF 32 is question 251.
251.
Yeah. Question by Dr. Huck to Adrian Wooten.
Yeah.
Who's asked about effectively investment and where it's coming from, and is saying, he says, as I say, I think something like 98% of inward investment is either US financed or US investment. As I said earlier, the US is the only country in the world that has a studio system that has the level of content financing, which it, within its own corporate structures, there's pretty much no other country in the world that makes film and television programs of the volume size and budget size that the US does. He then goes on to make the point which you made very fairly in your evidence in chief, that whilst Bollywood in India makes a huge number of films, they rarely anything above £1 million. They're not going to be in the market for premium stage space in the UK, are they?
I don't think Bollywood films will be, no.
So in terms of global demand, we're looking at that category of the global demand, which would be spent on production facilities, grade A production facilities designed for tentpole productions and high-end TV in the UK to support Marlowe.
Yes.
Which is going to be principally US investment.
US investment, yes, not necessarily just US producers,
No,
though.
that's why I put it US investment. And in terms of US investment, there's no evidence, is there, of
Actually, can I just come back on that
Do,
question if
yeah.
I'm allowed to? So US, I mean, this is very technical, but US investment, I think what we really mean here is US decision making, because often the investment comes from all over the world and increasingly so.
Yeah.
So there are examples of films from South Korea here, Mexican films that are here, Greek films that are here, which are funded globally, but it is the decision of the
I'm happy
studios.
it's US directed investment, quite happy with
Yeah.
that. In terms of MLAs, major leasing agreements, you're not presenting any evidence, are you, that there is any demand in the market by any of the major streaming or other production platforms for additional MLAs in the UK?
I haven't given any evidence, and I don't feel that I'm equipped
No, that's fine.
to
That's
do
just
so
fine. That's very
on that.
fair.
What I mean, I'm not sure where your question was going, but what I do know is that there are big studio players still out there who choose not to work
Yeah.
with MLA.
Yeah.
And I also know, which I think is really important, that a lot of the studios who have MLA also put productions outside those leased studios.
Yeah.
And they put productions not just in the UK, but sadly, they also put them in places like Hungary and Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
English language production.
Yeah, for a whole host of reasons. Because we're agreed, aren't we, that
Yeah.
in terms of where a production is based will depend on a whole range of factors,
Yeah.
not just availability of stage space, not just crew availability. It could be just down to where the director wants to make and prefers to make the film. Important point.
Yes.
And where the talent wants to work,
Yes.
particularly the above line talent. Yes.
Yes.
And in terms of the point you've made about there were major players either within or not having MLAs also using studio space, that includes other studio space in the UK, doesn't it? So those that are based in the West London cluster also use stage space in the UK for high-end television, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Now, in terms of your role in 2022, you tell us you were a non-executive member of the initial advisory group to the studios.
Yes.
What did that actually involve? Because you didn't tell us what that actually involved.
I mean, if I'm going to be honest, very little. It was the seeking of advice and support. I mean, I don't know if it helps for me to explain why I got involved, why I wanted to get involved in it.
What your involvement was. You've explained why you got involved.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was more what you actually did. So did you actually review any of the supporting information before it was submitted? Or was your role very much more high level?
It was much more high level than that.
Just want to take you to a couple of the original supporting documents. Well, one in particular. We can go to core document 1.234. So this is in the first file of the core documents.
Okay. This might take a minute.
No, that's fine.
So this is is it under the, so do you know what the number is, the CD number?
It's CD1, so it'll be in the file.
Oh,
which
CD
is
01.
01, that's
Yes,
right.
okay.
Yeah. And then when you found that, if you
Yeah.
go to 10, it probably isn't 023, it's 1234.
1.
234, 1-234.
Oh, 234. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. You're really taking me into the heartland then of this.
Yeah.
This right. Okay. Well, I'm up for it. Let's just see. I'm not sure I've got this far before, but
we're not going to do a deep mine, don't
oh
worry.
no, I'm intrigued to what I'm going to find when I get here. Right. Okay. And I am here. Economic case for development.
That's it, yeah.
Right.
So it was Volterra's economic case for the development. And when you've got that, you could go to page 7. I'll just check it's the PDF, page 7. It is the page 7.
With all those
That's it. I'm not going to ask you about
drawings.
the detail of the drawings or indeed about the detail of what is there, but I just in the box at the bottom right hand column, you'll see it's asserted that the West London cluster is the only place in the UK that provides the ecosystem of crew studios, infrastructure and supplies to accommodate blockbusters and high-end TV. As far as high-end TV is concerned, that's not correct, as it wasn't correct in 2022. High-end television productions occurred outside and regularly outside the West London cluster in 2022, didn't they?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Equally, stay within that document and go to page 9. And paragraph 118. National significance, do you see that paragraph heading?
Yes, yes, I
It
do.
says
Thank
in
you.
there, the UK is already missing out on 5 to 10 blockbusters per year, according to PwC research. That was 2018 research, wasn't it? As we can see from the footnote.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
No one is making the claim in 2025, are they, that the UK is missing out on blockbuster productions, certainly not 5 to 10 blockbuster productions per year by reason of the non-availability of stage space.
Well, I don't know that for certain, to be truthful. I haven't seen any evidence since then that anybody's had a look at it. But what I do know is there are English language studio productions going to other territories that could just as easily land here. What I don't know is whether they have deliberately chosen to go to Czechoslovakia rather than to shoot here.
That's the key point, isn't it? You
Mm.
don't know why they have chosen to go.
But logic would suggest that if they already have a home here and it's English language and they have an MLA, logic would suggest that if they had the opportunity, they would prefer to stay here.
Yeah, but
So it could be lost.
yeah, but logic might not dictate that. Logic, if the script requires a Prague location, would support a
This is true,
Czech location.
but
yes.
not things like Dune and Alien necessarily need a Prague destination.
Now, as far as we go then on to Volterra's next report, which was a response to advice the council received from Lambert Smith Hampton. So it's core document 1244.
So we're still
Still in the one file, but you need to go back,
so CD1,
and then it should be 204. No, it's not. I beg your pardon. Plainly not there. CD.
Oh, please.
It's 244. 2. So out of that file into the 2 file, if you would.
244.
Yes.
I've got, sorry, minerals assessment.
Yes. No, that's
no, I
sorry.
don't
Yes,
think you
you're
mean that.
absolutely right.
It's that-
Tempting though it is to ask you about the minerals assessment, I'm not going to.
Yeah. Am I in the wrong place?
I just need to.
I think you'd be
Okay, sorry. I'm beginning to worry then.
Yeah.
I could do diamonds, I think, but
I don't think diamonds in mind there.
Yes. Offer
Yeah.
of that.
no, I've got it. Yes, thank you. I've got it.
Okay, good. Thank you. And within that, if you go to paragraph 1.5, series
Thank
of
you.
bullet points in 155.
Yes.
This is just touching on the issue of what Marlow is designed to accommodate. You'll see, I think in the 5th bullet point,
Yes.
which the criticism made of Lambert Smith Hampton's response to the original Volterra document we've looked at, was that it does not recognise the difference between the types of high-end television and what Marlow Film Studios is built for. We've clarified this below, but Marlow Film Studios is not designed to accommodate high-end TV with minimum core expenditure of £1 million per broadcast hour. Instead, it's focused on major HETV with a minimum core expenditure of $9 million per broadcast hour. These major productions prefer to locate in the West London cluster. So even within high-end television, this is a scheme which is designed only for a sector of the high-end television market, isn't it?
Am I allowed to say I don't know? I think
course you are.
that's something that you've got people you can, experts,
No, that-
you can ask about that. I
Very
just
fair.
feel slightly out of my depth
No,
on
that's
that one.
very
Thank
fair.
you.
That's absolutely fair. I can take it up with other witnesses in
Thank
due
you.
course. The point I wanted to put it in context of your evidence was you mentioned the independent film tax credit, which has a relevant cap of 6.36 million, doesn't it?
Sorry, say that again. Has a
Has a cap of 6.36 million.
or a budget of 15 million.
Yeah, the budget is 15 million, but
Yes.
the credit is capped at 6.36 million.
Yes,
Yes.
but the budget's 15 million.
Yeah,
So
yes.
you could shoot up to 15 million.
Yeah.
But the credit you get is 6.36.
Yes.
And that affects, doesn't it, the stage space, which is likely to be used by independent film.
I think Marlow would assume that taking a film of a 15 million budget.
And in the context of its design, which is effectively designed to accommodate high-end TV with $9 million per broadcast hour.
Yes.
Yeah,
I've
okay.
slightly lost what the question is there, but
Well, I can take up the $9 million per hour with others in due course.
thank you.
Good. I think that's all I had for you. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it's still on. I didn't realise. I hope people haven't been catching me typing away. Okay. Miss Nevin, do you want to start or do you want to take a break? You said about 45 minutes and we've sat for just over an hour, so.
Would it be helpful for me to move up? I don't mind it.
Yeah, you want to swap places, don't you? Yeah, sorry.
If it's not too much trouble.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Right, we'll take an adjournment now. If we come back at 11, take 20 minutes and there's enough time to swap tables. You are now giving evidence, so you can't speak to any members of your party about the evidence that you're giving.
Okay.
You can order a brew and
Anyone?
order a brew or talk about the weather, but
Okay.
you can't talk about
Fair
the
enough.
case. Okay, thank you. We are adjourned until 11. Thanks.